You bombed human colonies. Congratulations, you just awakened the beasts. Part 1. The sky over New Haven had always been gentle. 2 suns, one gold and one pale blue, rose each morning over fields of tall wheat that shimmered like liquid metal in the light. Children played near irrigation ditches. Farmers checked their soil sensors, and the low hum of solar drones filled the air. It was peaceful. It was home. And then, without warning, it ended. Kyle was fixing a broken sprinkler valve behind his family's barn when the first flash lit up the horizon. He thought it was lightning. Odd, since storms were rare on New Haven. But then the ground shook. Not a tremor. A deep, rolling boom that knocked him off his feet. He scrambled up, heart pounding, and saw smoke rising in the distance. Not just smoke, fire. Great plumes of orange and black curling into the sky where the town center used to be. Sirens wailed. People screamed. The comms in his wristband crackled with panicked voices. Orbital strike! Multiple impacts! Get to shelters! Kyle didn't wait. He sprinted toward the house, calling for his sister. Lila was only 12, small for her age, with wide eyes that missed nothing. She met him halfway, barefoot and clutching a stuffed fox she'd had since she was 5. Mom and Dad? She asked, voice trembling. They were at the market, Kyle said, though he already knew. The market was gone, swallowed by fire. He grabbed her hand and ran for the old irrigation tunnel beneath the south field. It wasn't a proper bunker, just a maintenance passage lined with rusted pipes and emergency oxygen tanks left over from the colony's early days. But it was underground. And right then, underground was the only place to be. Above them, the sky turned red. More flashes, brighter, closer. Each one shook the earth like a giant's fist. Dust rained from the tunnel ceiling. Lila pressed her face into Kyle's shoulder, shaking. He held her tight, whispering, "It's okay, even though it wasn't. Nothing was okay. The bombardment lasted 17 minutes. 17 minutes of fire, noise, and silence where voices used to be. When it finally stopped, the world outside was quiet in a way Kyle had never heard before. No birds, no wind in the wheat. Just a low crackling hiss, the sound of buildings burning. Hours passed. Maybe a day. Time blurred in the dark. They rationed water from a cracked canteen Kyle had in his tool belt. Lila slept fitfully, curled against his side. He stayed awake, listening for footsteps, for rescue, for anything. On the third morning, marked only by the faint glow filtering through a grate, they heard engines. Not the soft whir of colony shuttles, but the heavy thrum of military dropships. Kyle helped Lila climb out, shielding her eyes from the suns. The landscape was unrecognizable. Where their home stood was a crater filled with black glass. Trees were twisted skeletons. The air smelled of ozone and burnt plastic. A Marine in scorched armor spotted them first. She knelt, visor retracting to reveal a face streaked with soot and exhaustion. "You kids alone?" she asked. Kyle nodded. He couldn't speak. She radioed it in. 2 survivors. Sector 7. Kids. No adults. Her voice was flat, like she'd said those words too many times already. More Marines arrived. Medics checked them for radiation burns and shock. Lila clung to Kyle's shirt, silent now, eyes hollow. They were loaded onto a transport with other survivors, maybe 20 in total, out of 10,000. As the ship lifted off, Kyle looked down one last time. New Haven was gone. Not damaged, erased. In orbit, aboard the medical frigate Aurora, doctors treated burns and dehydration. A counselor tried to talk to Lila, but she wouldn't speak. Kyle answered questions in short sentences. Name, age, last known location of parents. He gave the facts like stones one by one. Later, in a quiet corner of the mess hall, he overheard 2 officers talking. Krell hegemony, one said. They hit 6 colonies in one sweep. Called it a correction. Said humans were spreading like a virus. Any response from Earth? The other asked. Not yet, but you know how it is. When humans bleed, we don't cry. We sharpen our knives. Kyle didn't understand all the words, but he understood the tone. Anger. Cold and hard. That night, as Lila slept in a narrow bunk, Kyle sat by the viewport. Stars glittered, indifferent. Somewhere out there, the ones who did this were still flying, still breathing, still safe. He thought of his father teaching him to fix the sprinklers, of his mother humming while she baked bread from the first harvest, of Lila laughing as she chased fireflies in the wheat field. They were gone, But he wasn't. And as the ship carried them toward Earth, Kyle made a promise, not out loud, not to anyone but himself. They would pay. Every single one of them. He didn't know how. He didn't know when. But he knew it would happen, because humans didn't forget. And they didn't forgive, not when you burned their homes, not when you killed their families, not when you thought they were weak. The Krell had made a mistake. They thought they were stamping out pests. But in doing so, they'd lit a fire that wouldn't go out. Down in the med bay, Lila stirred in her sleep, clutching her stuffed fox. Up in the observation deck, Kyle watched the stars and waited. The storm was coming. And it would roar. You bombed human colonies? Congratulations, you just awakened the beasts. Part 2. Earth felt heavy, not in weight but in silence. The news of New Haven's destruction had spread fast, carried by emergency broadcasts and grieving families. Cities that once buzzed with traffic and music now moved slower, voices lower, eyes sharper. People gathered in parks and plazas not to celebrate but to remember. Candles flickered under gray skies. Flags hung at half-mast, and in government buildings decisions were being made behind closed doors. On Mars at the Olympus Military Academy, Frank Delgado stood on a training field watching cadets run obstacle courses in full gear. He was a tall man with silver in his hair and lines around his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. He'd fought in the Belt Wars decades ago, back when humanity's biggest enemies were other humans. Now the enemy came from beyond the stars and they showed no mercy. A young cadet named Jace stumbled over a low wall, dropping his rifle. Frank walked over, picked it up, and handed it back. You drop your weapon in battle, you're dead, he said, not unkindly. And if you're dead, you can't protect anyone. Jace nodded, face red with shame and effort. Yes, sir. Frank looked past him toward the red horizon. The Krell think we're soft. They think we'll beg for peace after one strike. He paused. They don't know us. Inside the Academy's command center, screens showed fleet movements, supply lines, and threat assessments. Earth's unified command was calling up reserves, reactivating old warships, and fast-tracking new pilots. But Frank knew weapons alone wouldn't win this. It was about will, about heart, and humans had plenty of both. Meanwhile, far from Mars, on the icy moon of Titan, Dr. Owen Briggs sat alone in a dimly lit lab. The walls were lined with data screens, most showing star maps and energy readings from deep space. Owen was thin, with messy brown hair and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. He hadn't slept in 2 days. Not since the attack. He wasn't a soldier. He was an astrophysicist hired by the Terran Science Directorate to study strange signals near the galactic core. For years he'd tracked faint pulses, rhythmic, too regular to be natural but too ancient to be from any known species. He called them echo patterns. Most of his colleagues dismissed them as cosmic noise. But Owen believed they meant something. Now, after New Haven, the signals had changed. They were stronger, closer, almost responding. He replayed the latest recording. A low hum, then a series of sharp clicks, then silence. It wasn't language. Not human language anyway. But it felt intentional, like someone or something was listening. Owen rubbed his eyes. What are you? He whispered to the screen. Back on Earth, in a small apartment in Chicago, a woman named Mia Torres packed a duffel bag. She was 28, with short black hair and calloused hands from years of flight sims and engine repairs. She'd been grounded after a training accident last year, deemed too reckless by command. But now, with the fleet short on pilots, her name was back on the roster. Her younger brother had been on New Haven. He'd sent her a message the day before the attack, just a quick video of him holding up a jar of homemade jam, grinning. Tried your recipe, he'd said. Needs more sugar. That was the last thing she ever heard from him. She zipped the bag shut. No more waiting, no more regrets. At the same time, in a refugee processing center near Geneva, Kyle and Lila sat in a quiet room with a social worker. They'd been on Earth for a week. Lila still barely spoke. She drew pictures instead, mostly of fire and broken houses. Kyle answered questions when asked, but his mind was elsewhere. He watched news reports of military buildups, of protests turning into rallies, of factories working around the clock to build ships and weapons. One evening, as they ate dinner in the center's cafeteria, an old man at the next table leaned over. You from New Haven? He asked softly. Kyle nodded. The man's eyes were wet. My granddaughter was there too. He didn't say more. He didn't need to. That night, Kyle dreamed of fire. But this time, he wasn't running. He was standing in the middle of it, unburned, watching the sky crack open. On Titan, Owen made a breakthrough. He cross-referenced the Echo P. Turns with the exact time of the Krell attack. The moment the first plasma warhead hit New Haven, the signal spiked. Not randomly, directly. As if the violence had triggered something. He sent an urgent report to Earth Command marked Priority Alpha. It read, "Unknown entities may be reacting to large-scale aggression. Recommend extreme caution. Do not provoke further conflict until origins are understood." But his warning was buried under hundreds of other messages. Battle plans, casualty lists, political demands. No one read it. For if they did, they didn't care. Because by then humanity had made up its mind. They wouldn't hide. They wouldn't beg. They would fight. Frank Delgado gave a speech to his cadets that week. He stood on a platform under the Martian sky, voice steady. They thought bombing a farm world would break us. But all it did was wake us up. He looked at their young faces, scared, angry, ready. Remember this, we don't start wars for fun. But once we're in one, we finish it. Not for revenge. For the ones who can't. Mia Torres reported for duty at Luna Space Dock. Her old call sign, Rook, was reinstated. She climbed into the cockpit of a Mark 7 interceptor, fingers remembering every switch, every lever. The ship hummed to life around her. For the first time in months, she felt calm. Kyle, watching a live broadcast of fleet ships launching from orbit, turned to Lila. "We're not alone anymore," he said. She didn't answer. But she squeezed his hand, and far beyond Neptune, in the cold dark between stars, something stirred. Not a ship. Not a machine. Something older than planets, older than light. It had slept for millions of years, waiting for a species brave enough or desperate enough to make the universe take notice. Humanity had just done that. The Krell had fired the first shot. But they had no idea what they'd awakened, on Earth, on Mars, on Titan, and in the hearts of survivors like Kyle and Mia. A new fire burned, quiet, determined, unstoppable. The galaxy had ignored humans for too long. Now it would learn their name and it would fear it. You bombed human colonies? Congratulations, you just awakened the beasts. Part 3. The Krell fleet moved like a storm. Hundreds of ships, sleek and black, armed with plasma cannons and gravity lances, swept toward the edge of human space. They had crushed 6 colonies without losing a single vessel. To them, humans were insects, loud, scattered, easy to swat. Their commanders expected little resistance as they pushed toward Mars and Earth. They were wrong. Humanity was ready. Every shipyard from Luna to Ganymede worked day and night. Old freighters were fitted with missile pods. Mining drones were reprogrammed to swarm enemy hulls. Even civilian pilots volunteered, flying patched-together fighters with nothing but courage and targeting software. At the front of it all was Mia Torres, leading a squadron called Rook's Revenge. She didn't speak much before the battle. She just checked her systems, tightened her harness, and whispered her brother's name. The first clash happened near the asteroid belt. Krell scouts moved ahead of the main force, scanning for traps. They found none, until Mia's squadron dropped out of a hollowed-out comet, engines silent, weapons hot. Her plan was simple. Lure them in, then hit them from behind with railgun slugs moving at near-light speed. It worked. 3 Krell destroyers cracked open like eggs, spilling wreckage into the void. But the real fight was still coming. On Mars, Frank Delgado watched the battle feeds from Olympus Command. He saw young pilots die. He saw ships vanish in flashes of blue fire. But he also saw something else. Human ships adapting, learning, fighting smarter with every pass. A cargo hauler rammed a Krell cruiser after its engines failed. A medic shuttle used its emergency thrusters to dodge fire and rescue a downed pilot. These weren't just soldiers. They were neighbors, teachers, farmers who'd picked up guns because there was no one else to stand. Back on Earth, Kyle and Lila sat in a shelter basement with other refugees. The walls shook from distant sonic booms as defense platforms fired into orbit. Lila finally spoke that day. "Will they win?" she asked, voice small. Kyle looked at the flickering screen showing fleet positions. They have to. Out near Neptune, something else was happening. Owen Briggs had been watching the deep space sensors for days, barely eating, barely sleeping. The echo patterns had grown louder, faster, almost frantic. Then, without warning, they stopped. For 3 full hours, silence. Owen thought he'd lost the signal. Then the alarms blared. Massive gravitational waves rolled through the outer system. Not from a black hole, not from a star. From something moving, fast, huge, and impossible. Telescopes focused on the disturbance. What they saw made Owen drop his coffee cup. Shapes emerged from the distortion. Not ships. Not even close. They were vast, dark forms covered in shifting plates that glowed faintly with internal light. Some looked like coiled serpents made of stone and metal. Others resembled giant crabs with limbs longer than cities. They had no visible engines, no weapons ports, no signs of life, but they moved with purpose, turning as one toward the Krell fleet. Owen's hands shook as he typed a new message to command. Unknown entities confirmed. Origin unknown. Heading toward Krell Armada. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage. This time someone read it. A junior analyst flagged it to the fleet admiral, who scoffed. More ghost stories, he muttered, and ordered all ships to hold position. But Mia saw them first. Her interceptor's long-range scope picked up the anomalies as she regrouped after a dogfight. At first she thought it was debris. Then one of the shapes turned and its surface rippled like water. Her onboard AI couldn't classify it. Object exceeds known mass limits, it said flatly. She radioed command. Something's out here, big, not ours. Not theirs. Before anyone could answer, the beasts struck. The largest one, dubbed Leviathan by terrified comms officers, drifted toward the lead Krell dreadnought. It didn't fire. It didn't speak. It simply raised one limb and space itself seemed to bend. The dreadnought folded inward, crushed by invisible force, then vanished into a point of light that blinked out like a snuffed candle. Panic spread through the Krell fleet. Ships broke formation, firing wildly. Their plasma bolts struck the beasts and fizzled out like rain on hot metal. One beast opened a seam in its side and a beam of silver energy lanced out, slicing 3 cruisers in half without sound. Human ships pulled back, stunned. Mia held her breath, watching the impossible unfold. The beasts moved with eerie grace, surrounding the Krell like wolves closing in on wounded prey. In less than an hour, the entire invasion force was gone. Not defeated, erased. Silence returned to the outer system. The beasts hovered motionless, as if waiting. On Earth, crowds gathered in streets staring at public screens showing the battle footage. No one cheered, not yet. They were too awed, too afraid. Who were these things? Allies or something worse? Owen Briggs finally understood. He replayed the data again and again. The beasts hadn't responded to the Krell attack. They'd responded to humanity's reaction to it. The rage, the refusal to surrender, the willingness to fight back even when outnumbered and outgunned. That was the trigger. He whispered to his empty lab. They're not here for us. They're here because of us. Frank Delgado received a secure call from Earth Command. What do we do now? The officer asked. Frank looked out the window at his cadets training below. We don't attack. We don't run, we watch. And we earn their respect. Mia guided her damaged interceptor back to Luna Dock. As she climbed out, ground crew stared at her like she'd seen a ghost. Maybe she had. She walked past them without a word, heading for the observation deck. There she watched the beasts on the main screen, still floating near Neptune, silent and immense. Kyle saw the news in the shelter. Lila stood beside him, eyes wide. Are they helping us? She asked. I think, Kyle said slowly. They're showing the galaxy what happens when you hurt humans. No one knew what the beasts wanted. No one knew if they would stay. But one thing was clear. The Krell had thought they were ending a threat. Instead, they had awakened something far older, far stronger, and now standing on humanity's side. The universe had just learned a new rule. Hurt humans. And you don't just face humans, you face the beasts. You bombed human colonies? Congratulations, you just awakened the beasts. Part 4. The silence after the battle was heavier than the noise. Human ships drifted in the dark, engines idling. Crews too stunned to speak. On every screen, the beasts hung in space near Neptune, unmoving, unreadable. They had wiped out the Krell Armada without firing a single shot that anyone could understand. No explosions, no debris fields, just empty space where hundreds of warships had been. It was as if the universe itself had decided the Krell no longer deserved to exist. On Earth, governments scrambled. Emergency meetings ran for days. Some leaders wanted to send a message of thanks. Others demanded weapons be aimed at the beasts just in case. Fear and wonder fought in every heart. People gathered in homes and streets, watching live feeds from deep space probes, waiting for the beast to move, to speak, to do anything. Owen Briggs barely left his lab on Titan. He studied every scrap of data from the encounter. The beast gave off no heat, no radio signals, no signs of biology or machinery as humans knew it. Yet they responded to threats with impossible precision. Owen noticed something others missed. After the Krell vanished, the largest beast turned slightly as if looking toward Earth, not with hostility, with attention. He sent another message, this time marked eyes only for the highest council. They are not machines. They are not alive like us, but they understand intent. They chose to act because we chose to fight. This time his words reached the right ears. A small team was formed, scientists, linguists, former soldiers, to study the beast without provoking them. Owen was put in charge, though he felt anything but in control. On Mars, Frank Delgado stood before the Unified Command Council via hologram. His face was calm, but his voice carried weight. "We don't know what they are," he said. "But we know what they did. They protected us. Not because we asked. Because we earned it," he paused. "If we treat them like enemies now, we prove the Krell right. That we're just animals who lash out at anything we don't understand." His words swayed the vote. No weapons would be pointed at the beasts. No probes would be sent too close. Humanity would watch and wait. Mia Torres was grounded for rest after the battle. Her hands still shook when she thought about the dreadnought folding into nothing. She visited a memorial wall in Luna City, where names of the lost were etched into black stone. Her brother's name was there. She touched it, then stepped back. For the first time, she didn't feel only grief. She felt purpose. She requested a transfer, not to a fighter squadron, but to the new Deep Observation Group. She wanted to be near the beasts, not to fight, but to understand. Command approved. They needed pilots who had seen them and lived. Back on Earth, Kyle and Lila were moved to a safer housing unit in the mountains. The refugee center was closing. Life was trying to return to normal, though no one knew what normal meant anymore. Lila started speaking more. She drew new pictures, not of fire, but of huge, shadowy shapes with stars in their eyes. When Kyle asked what they were, she said, "The quiet giants. They're watching over us," he didn't correct her. Maybe she was right. One evening, a government officer visited their home. He sat at their small table, hat in hand. "Your story from New Haven? It's being shared in schools now," he said gently. "You two represent what we lost and what we're fighting to keep." Kyle looked at Lila, then back at the man. "We're not symbols," he said. "We're just kids who lived." The officer nodded. "Sometimes that's enough." Far beyond, near the edge of the solar system, the beasts remained. They didn't move closer. They didn't leave. They simply were. Probes sent from Earth kept a respectful distance, recording every shift in their form. Owen noticed patterns. When human ships passed by on routine patrols, the beasts would tilt slightly as if acknowledging them. When a damaged freighter drifted too close to one, the beast extended a limb, not to attack but to nudge it gently back toward safe space. It was care. Not human care, but something ancient and deliberate. Then came the message. Not from the beasts. From the Krell hegemony, a single ship unarmed appeared at the edge of human space. It broadcast a simple signal on all frequencies. "We seek peace." Panic flared again. Was it a trick? A scout for another attack? But Frank Delgado argued for listening. "They saw what happened," he told the council. "They know they can't win. Let them talk." A meeting was arranged, not on Earth, not on a Krell world, but in neutral space near the orbit of Uranus. Human diplomats would attend. And the beast would watch from afar. Owen watched the feed from Titan. The Krell delegates looked small, almost frail, in their sleek suits. Their leader spoke first. "We believed you were a plague," he said, voice trembling. "We were wrong. You are something else. Something. Chosen." No one corrected him. No one needed to. The peace terms were simple. The Krell would withdraw from all human territories, pay reparations in resources, and never attack again. In return, humanity would not pursue them into their own space. It wasn't forgiveness. It was balance. As the Krell ship turned to leave, one of the beasts shifted. Just slightly. A low hum echoed through space, picked up by every sensor. not a threat. A warning. A reminder. The Krell ship accelerated away faster than protocol allowed. On Earth, people finally cheered. Not for war, for survival, for a future. Kyle stood on a hill outside his new home, Lila beside him. The night sky was clear. He pointed to a faint cluster of lights near the horizon, Neptune's direction. "They're still there," he said. Lila nodded. "They won't let anyone hurt us again." Mia, aboard her new observation vessel, logged her first official report. Day 12, the beasts remain. No hostile action. No communication. But I feel it. They're waiting. Not for us to speak, but to grow. Owen closed his eyes in his lab. He finally understood. The beasts weren't guardians of a place. They were guardians of a spirit. The spirit that made humans stand when others would kneel. That made them rebuild when others would flee. That made them protect even when they had nothing left. Humanity hadn't been saved by the beasts. They had been seen. And in the cold vastness of space, that was the rarest gift of all. You bombed human colonies? Congratulations, you just awakened the beasts. Part 5. Peace did not come with fanfare. It came quietly, like dawn after a long night. The Krell kept their word. Their ships withdrew. Their colonies sealed their borders. No more warheads fell from the sky, but humanity did not return to how things were before. Too much had changed. Too much had been seen. On Earth, cities rebuilt, but with wider eyes. Children learned not just math and history, but how to listen to the stars. In schools, teachers spoke of New Haven not as a tragedy alone, but as a turning point, the moment humans stopped being just another species and became something the universe noticed. Kyle and Lila moved to a new colony world. Not a farming outpost like New Haven, but a place called Viridia, gifted to humanity by the Unified Council as a symbol of renewal. It was green with soft rains and twin rivers that met in a valley of flowering trees. The beasts had watched as the first transport ships landed. They did not speak, but their presence was felt. A quiet hum in the air, a sense of safety that no wall or weapon could give. Lila started school there. She made friends quickly, her voice no longer a whisper. She still drew the beasts sometimes, but now she added small human figures standing beside them, not afraid. Kyle worked with engineers to help build homes and water systems. He was older now, not just in years, but in spirit. He no longer dreamed of revenge. He dreamed of roots. On Mars, Frank Delgado retired from active duty, but not from service. He opened a small academy outside Olympus City, not for soldiers, but for thinkers, kids who wanted to understand the galaxy, not conquer it. He taught them strategy, yes, but also patience, respect, and the weight of choice. Strength isn't about how hard you hit, he told them. It's about knowing when not to. Mia Torres became the first human pilot to fly a long-range mission near the beasts. Not to study them with probes or scans, but simply to be near them. Her ship, the Rook's Hope, carried no weapons, only sensors, a message buoy, and a single flower grown on Viridia. She drifted within 1,000 kilometers of the nearest beast, heart-pounding not with fear but awe. The beast turned its massive form slightly, and for a moment Mia swore she felt warmth, like sunlight through clouds. She released the flower into space. It spun slowly, glowing in the starlight before vanishing into the beast's shimmering surface. No one knew if it meant anything, but Mia believed it did. Owen Briggs never left Titan. He grew older in his quiet lab, surrounded by data that no one else could read. He discovered that the beasts communicated not with sound or light, but with shifts in gravity and time, tiny ripples that carried meaning across light years. He called it the language of consequence. Every action, every choice sent echoes into the deep. The beasts listened to those echoes, and they answered when the echo was strong enough. He wrote a book, simple and short, titled Why They Stayed. It became required reading for every student in the system. Its last line read, "They did not choose us because we were perfect. They chose us because we tried." Years passed. Human ships began to explore again, not with guns but with open hands. They met other species, some curious, some wary. Word had spread, do not harm humans, not because they were the strongest, but because something watched over them. Something old. Something just... The beasts never left the edge of the solar system. They orbited slowly like silent sentinels. Sometimes when a child on Viridia looked up at night, they'd point and say, "There's one." And their parents would nod, not with fear, but with quiet pride. At a global summit held on the moon of Luna, young leaders from every human world gathered. Mia spoke for the pilots. A farmer from Viridia spoke for the settlers. A scientist from Titan spoke for the seekers. And Kyle, now a calm young man with steady hands, spoke for the survivors. "We lost everything once," he said. "But we didn't lose who we are. And that's why we're still here. No one declared victory. No one built monuments to war. Instead, they built libraries, gardens, and ships meant for meeting, not fighting." One evening, as the twin sun set over Viridia, Lila Stowe, out on a hill with her own child, a boy named Eli who asked endless questions about the stars. She pointed to the sky where Neptune hung like a blue jewel. "See that light?" she said. "That's where the quiet ones live. They protect us because we protect each other." Eli squinted. "Will they ever talk to us?" Lila smiled. "Maybe not with words, but they listen, and that's enough." Back on Earth, Frank Delgado walked through his academy garden, cane in hand. Students waved from benches, reading, debating, dreaming. He looked up at the sky and whispered, "We didn't win because we had bigger guns. We won because we refused to break." And far beyond, in the endless dark, the beasts remained. Not as masters, not as gods, but as witnesses. They had seen a species burn, rise, and choose kindness over fear. That was rare. That was worthy. Humanity had been tested, and they had passed. The galaxy would never underestimate them again.